I got a great guest for us this week. His name's Christopher McFadden. Christopher used to work with you and I back in the Opus Hotel days, and he's a lover of hospitality, and he's taken that love now to focus on training and help building the next generation of hospitality managers and hospitality people. And this is great because we were talking earlier this week about the brain drain, the post COVID. Where did everybody go? Where did everybody that knew what they were doing go? And then I managed to hook up with Chris again, and I just thought this was round peg, round hole. He's got a ton of experience and a passion that's unmatched in industry. So welcome, Christopher McFadden.
Robin, thank you very much, Steve. This is great. Super awesome to be with you.
So hey, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing post COVID.
My biggest thing was, when you fall into a hole, you got to step back up and get yourself out of it. And I did that, made some big changes in my life with my wife and I, moving back to Southern Ontario to care for family needs. And I did a video a while ago where it was about reprioritizing your priorities, really kind of puts things in line. And it's exactly what I did, and launched the McFadden Group. And I'd gone from really leadership positions and training to now leadership actionably to make sure that even the hostess and the barback is the ones that are being listened to and heard and have the opportunity to grow in our industry. So it's been great, but it's been a pivot with my company about a year ago now into hospitality career coaching, and starting to take the word restaurant off of that, just so people understood that hospitality was a gesture of things that we do, and it's not us just food and beverage folk of taking care of people, but more of that relationship that we do with people. So it's been a great transformation because I just do it a little bit differently, where I don't just focus on, hey, let's make it a better resume, but let's look at making you a better you personally to help you really drive you professionally. So it's been a good ride. Good ride.
I think one of your mottos is building people, not positions. So what you just touched on there, building people. So what's that philosophy mean to you? And how does that apply to your coaching?
I think it's interesting is that the less amount of time that I spend on what you're doing in the role and more about what your responsibility is personally within that role, it changes the tone. So I've had a couple clients recently where in the middle of a conversation, they say something out loud and they don't even realize that they said it, and they catch themselves. And I'm like, great, got it. We're exactly where you need to be. So I've got people now that have got their own companies, realizing that they should have fired their own company, and getting rid of that because it was keeping them down, where I've got other people that thought they were supposed to move into the front of house and in the middle of a session just calls out somebody and says, I'm a fucking chef, and didn't realize that they said it out loud when they were trying to go from the kitchen to the front. All they were trying to really do and should have been doing was to discover exactly where they needed to be was where they were. But it took a whole element of self-discovery to be able to get that there for them, because I just simply take them through sessions that has nothing to do with me and has everything to do with them. And the more that they have to find a little bit of humility within themselves to find some center within who they are, it changes the frame for everybody. But again, I had to do that for myself while I went through some pretty sorrowful moments personally, and I had to alter things for myself professionally. And now that I can help others do it, I do it with just kindness, and it makes my day better when I know I've made somebody else's day better by discovering what they have. What's funny is that somebody said to me the other day, it was like, I've got emotional intelligence coaching certifications and masterclass coaching certifications. And somebody said, you're an emotional intelligence coach. I said, well, yeah. I said, that's the why. And I said, but we have to have something that connects to that. So if I'm just going to make you better for yourself, but you're still going to be miserable when you're going to go out and do the thing that you need to do to survive in life, then it doesn't make any sense. And if we're in the business and the gesture of taking care of others, is that if we take care of ourselves first, then professionally, I want people to love hospitality as much as a lot of us did. And not saying that doesn't exist anymore, but I think it's few and far between on how much passion goes into the hard work of 25 years of doing it myself and lining up tables with a string and going through all of the ups and downs and the highs and the lows that we can go in this business and how it can challenge us. So I believe that our hospitality business needs to be built better by people that want to be a part of it. It's career coaching just in a completely different way, but nobody else is doing it the way I'm doing it. And it's pretty neat because the professional tone shows up usually by about session 3, session 4 in our 6-session program. And definitely by the break between 1 and 2 sessions for my 3 session program. So it's pretty cool. And then for the team stuff that I do 6 hour sessions, by about hour 3.5, people just go, ah, I'm like, great, great. Now we're starting to discover stuff. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, then there's no point in us taking care of other people in the business that we do. And I just want people to do that better because they do it better for themselves.
So how did you fall into the industry?
I was a host at Eastside Mario's in 1998. That was it. I was in retail through my high school time, and I loved it. I worked in retail at Athletes World shoe store, which was like a Foot Locker, and then my girlfriend worked at Eastside Mario's, and I was like, that just seems like a better opportunity to make some more money instead of rolling on the commission-based kind of world where I was minimum wage or commission, which I did great at. I was a great salesman when I was a teenager, and I think that carried on to my world as a sommelier. But and then it just kind of happened where I was in theater school and took a break from it and ended up in Lake Louise, and I fell in love with wine. And I started studying my sommelier diploma when I was 20, and I got it just before my 24th birthday. But I knew that that's where I was going to drive myself. Was I wanted to have that opportunity to take something that somebody else made and pair it with something somebody else made and make it make sense for somebody that I've never met before. And it was cool and magical to be able to do that and be a part of it. And I loved it. But again, I had to learn how to run restaurants before anybody gave me a wine list. So I was lucky with a lot of independent leadership that helped me understand corporate leadership in a different way. But
Sorry, is there one person in particular that you can remember that either inspired you or really helped to teach you something about the industry that you've kept with you all this time?
yeah, I'll give shout outs to a few people here. So this is a GM and a director of operations of mine from 2002 when I worked for Biff's French Bistro in Toronto at Oliver Bonacini Restaurants, which I had left Lake Louise and ended up joining them. But Dave Partridge was probably the greatest GM that I've ever had, and I think he's got Partridge Fine Wines as his company now in Alberta. And then the director of operations, Bruce McAdams. I see more of him now in opportunities that I've had to teach a course that he wrote at Centennial College, co-wrote at Centennial College, and understand his position on leadership. And I think the 20-year gap that I had between when I saw him last and when I had the opportunity to see him again, I go backwards in thinking of my success started really when I was 22 and the opportunity with the two gentlemen there. And then in 2005, 2006, when I got hired at the Belvedere restaurant in Calgary, when it was really in the top 10 in the country, and Clayton Morgan, still the greatest independent restaurant owner I've worked for. This is the guy that used to send invoices to food companies for charging him gas on their invoice. So he would charge them back $1 more than the gas value just for the cost of writing a check and putting it in the mail. And I was like, great. And he had always given me this, mantra that everything in life is for sale, everything has a price, and that the only constant in the universe is change. And that has shown more up in my life as I've made some big changes in my life, that I realized that it all came from somewhere and someone. So I give shout outs to Bruce McAdams, Dave Partridge, and Clayton Morgan solidly through.
Steve, I don't know if I ever asked you that question outside of myself. Was there a manager from when you were just starting out that really touched things off for you?
It's a good question. I don't know that I've thought super deeply about it, but I worked for Umberto Mengi for
Wow.
three and a
Okay.
half 3.5 years. And then the GM at El Porto, Borgo Antico, El Porto, when I started there was his name was Cosmo.
Yeah.
Um, so coming from those guys, it was an intense environment to work in, right? And I don't know that the methods that were used, 20 plus years ago now, you can almost get away with today. But the what I really learned there and from those guys was that unwavering attention to detail. How I'm a little bit OCD about stuff, and if you're going to do something, you do it right, and yeah, it just that unwavering commitment to quality and detail.
My chef at the Belvedere restaurant was trained by Umberto Mango. and it's funny because my wife worked for him and great guy, right? But the reality is that everybody comes from a different beast, right? So that when now all of a sudden you're in charge, but the person above you was a draining force on you. Um, and as monstrous and beautiful as Umberto is, Alain Chabot was a phenomenal chef. But he was a French chef, and he came from Umberto's background. So yeah, it's a different grind then. Absolutely.
I think, well, that brings me just from sort of their style to sort of my next question for you is burnout, right? So many in hospitality hit a point, and I'm sure you see this in your work, where they feel stuck, undervalued, burned out. I know, from my 25 years in the industry, certainly hit that at a certain point. So, what are you seeing in your work that are kind of the common reasons that people hit that career rut, and then how do you help them rediscover that joy for hospitality?
I used to always just simply say to my team was that we like to go out too. And I say this to my clients, I'm like, don't forget that you like to go out, right? So what is your expectation when you go out, and how are you going to provide that? How are you going to provide that experience for somebody? And I think that the difference, it's the hard idea of having to go to work versus wanting to go to work and getting yourself into that mindset of, got to go to work today, right? Versus the opportunity to go to work today. Not a lot of people have work. And there's lots of restaurant jobs out there. There's lots of hotel and tourism jobs. Um, and I think a big gap, and I made that comment to somebody the other day where I said we rely so heavily on applying on everything online, and everything's got to be done online. There's so many companies using AI to go through resumes, is that in the people business, there still has to be a human component to what we do. So I've got a client that wants to apply at the Royal York. And I was like, great. So send everything in as it needs to be done through Fairmont's Royal York site. But then put your cover letter in, your resume in, and your reference letter from me, and paperclip that in a brown envelope and walk to the concierge desk and drop it off and ask for so-and-so. And say, can you at least get this to Ms. So-and-so? I sent it in line. I said, but too many people start sinking in and not feeling that the industry wants them is because they're relying on the employer to be more prevalent in reaching out to them versus them being more prevalent in going after what they want. So I'm a big driving force on people going, don't just walk around and suck about, why didn't you get the role? I got a client right now. The G license is an important thing for being a front door, a bell person. So bell person, I think is what we're going at. And he says, but I need to have my G license by this date, and I can't. There's no way it's going to happen. I said, great. So when you write a thank you email, first have your G license booked for August. And he goes, but he already told me that he needs this for July. I said, but if he was offering you a second interview and it couldn't happen because of this, go out and tell him that you've got your G license booked. Hopefully there's an opportunity to talk at the end of August when you've got it. Because maybe the person that he hires, it doesn't work out, doesn't like it, something else happens to another staff member, is that there's always movement happening within our operations. So if that's the rule that you want, and maybe you caught his attention enough to be able to just show that much interest in being a part of that company, I would hire anybody that was eager like that. So set yourself up for the success of that, right? But start going after things that you want. And if it doesn't work out, then park it. Just walk away from it. It's, don't get pushed around by the things that show up. Right? So just start pushing them away and moving along a bit. I believe you can go after everything you want. If it doesn't work out, it's timing that resulted in that. But there's other things out there. So it gives you a great learning opportunity to do it.
For sure. I think too, I mean, that's for younger people. I think that's some great advice because I mean, well, I send my resume in and I have to apply online or I have to apply via LinkedIn, and that's all I can do, right? And we had a young man come in here, my office, to apply for a position. Robin knows him, but when 17 years old, but when he came in, he was dressed well, had a tie, had a pen, had a copy of his resume with him, right? Well dressed, presented well. I mean, it was sort of refreshing to see that, because I mean you see plenty of people that come in or for an interview and aren't prepared and aren't and don't need someone wearing a suit or anything like that, but just prepared to present themselves well and properly. And I think that's something in the digital online world we live in now has been lost. And I agree with you that that personal connection is still so important.
You know how good you feel when you dress up to go out to go and look for a job. And that's 17, fantastic. One of the best hires I ever made was a 15-year-old hostess who had a killer interview with me that I was like, she's got to be 20. And she's like, I'm 15. I was like, that was the greatest interview I've ever had. Greatest female handshake I've ever had. This kid had. And she became my lead hostess at 17. Right? But the change, like I was doing great things through COVID. We treated our staff more importantly than our guests, and we kept our staff, and we had more guests, and right, people were applying and just walking in. But then I gave the hostess an opportunity, asked them 3 questions. I can't interview everybody. Here's 3 questions to ask them, and would you hire them? And my hostess was like, what? I was like, you work 5 lunches here, so you give them 3 questions. And if you think those 3 questions are relevant to you, then bring the resume to me and say, you need to meet this person. Let's get people involved with these decisions. And I made this comment on the show with Christian Fisher recently where, if we gave opportunities for everybody to have a thing to do in a leadership action, then we'd be building better leaders across the board. Is that you can't be at the front door all the time, and you can't be at the pass, and you can't be everywhere, right? And if people aren't leading these parts of the restaurant that are all equally important to the end result of better guest experiences, everything needs to be done with intention and grace. So if you start thinking about that when you're walking out for a job that you're looking for, fantastic. And then the very big thing too is make sure when you're bringing your resume and bring a cover letter and reference letter into the interview with you is never staple it. And they're like, why? I said, because now that person has to flip over the pages and loses this attention to you. So it should just be, they can slide it side by side. And they're like, oh, I didn't think that was going to be an important thing. So this is a very old school way of it, right? AI is winning on everything, but there has to be a traditionalness that I think still exists and more of a humbleness that exists with people going, this person really wants to be here and has put this kind of effort into being here. And you can teach people how to do the gig, right? But when people are fully aligned with themselves, they go after it differently.
Now, what about the training and the teaching? You just mentioned that, but I've had a lot of recent experiences where I'm sitting down and working with managers that are just so new to the industry that they really don't know what they're talking about. That's great that they got hired and they've got a lot of personality and they got a terrific presence, but they don't know what they're doing. And the owner isn't necessarily there to train them. The GM isn't necessarily there to train them. So, that's helping me because I'm spending more time in being able to teach, which I really love. But is there a component of what you're doing to help replace that brain drain? Do you see that as part of your function? What's happening in that regard?
Yeah, I do see it. And again, I've approached this completely differently with what I'm doing is that this is a full emotional intelligence scope that we're doing and within leadership development but again, actionable leadership and not just positional leadership is that, if an entire team is all operating perfectly in sync, right, is that now I think that opportunity for an owner that maybe isn't as paying as much attention to the manager that he just needs to be there, it shifts things because I think there's an inspiration that exists within all of us in the human capacity of just being people. It's like the entire conversation where people are like, well, how do you motivate people? And like motivation's an internal state. If you can't motivate someone. You can inspire somebody to be motivated. However, right, is that if we can all start lifting each other up because we're all happier doing what we're doing, I think it changes the mindset because now the manager doesn't have to just micromanage or pay too much attention to these little things and gets an opportunity to go, team's really in sync. I'm super stoked to be able to spend more time now with Robin and learn about how inventory really works, the importance of this, and why data is crucial. But if your team is in sync, your ROI starts figuring itself out, and the attention paid to, inventory isn't the most delightful thing to do. And you've chosen to do it for other people, but it's important. It's important. So the ROIs, I believe, makes sense, but it'll be an easier thing to get better results out of your inventory counts, more intensity of people understanding the seriousness of why this is going to make an impact. All because the team that they're running is perfectly put together. So I think there's an opportunity with the younger managers that are here, and I think a lot of them, and it breaks my heart because we got into a place in COVID where all of a sudden it was like, we just need people. Where sections were empty and sections are closed in restaurants, and then I see managers now. I've got a friend that I shared this with you the other night, Robin, where this person had sent out their entire company runs on WhatsApp. Like this is an independent restaurant, and the entire service runs on WhatsApp chats. And things that were coming out where people were getting threatened if they weren't doing certain things that were apparently like gone, like gone. I've had some real bad bosses. I've had a boss once. I just God bless her heart, but there was a night one night where she looked at me. This is 5 years into a company, 300 in the book. We got the Philadelphia 76ers coming in for dinner. And on a third moment where she was miffed at me, she turns and looks at me. She goes, "Stop looking like you're going to cry every time somebody criticizes you." And I was like, "What in the fuck? Pardon me? That's what we're doing here?" I couldn't get over it. And you know what? I wasn't always a delightful boss. I know that, right? I absolutely know that, right? But now that I've framed it all again, right, is that I made some bad moves and bad playful moves and things that were never, meaningful by any means. But you make some bad decisions in the heat of moments, and then you try to repair them, and you do your best at that. And I'm very pleased on how I left running rooms and now having an opportunity to help people run their teams with a different light, with not doing it in just the traditional way that you do it. I think it's a way more important way of looking at it.
For sure. I mean, I do think we're seeing sort of I don't want to say paradigm, but at least an industry wide shift or transition. You talk about sort of emotional intelligence, and that leads to mental health. I mean, in the past, you had a bad shift, and everybody go out and sort of overindulge or abuse, everybody abusing drugs and alcohol, and sexual harassment was almost encouraged. And that's the sort of that old school way of doing it. Do you think it's I mean, obviously it's a societal trend, but do you think that's growing more and more in the industry with like people like you doing what you're doing? I mean, I think it can only be a benefit long term.
Yeah, I think it is because we're really lucky that the world of drinking has slowed down. There's not as much interest in it by the younger generation, and the non-alcoholic world now is explosively beautiful. And my friend Kimberly Fleer from Last Call Coaching, I'd done this piece one day where it's promoting that the non-alcoholic beverages at the end of the night. Here's a nice glass of non-alcoholic Viognier Sauvignon Blanc. That's exactly it. And I think there's a shift in, it still exists 100%. But I think there's a shift in the demographic today. That there's 25-year-olds that just go, you know what, I don't need this, and then they'll just walk out and live with their parents for $200 a month on rent, and not do the hard grind that goes into it. But I think the entire shift of what's happened in technology being so heavily influenced because of COVID, needing that component for businesses to survive. I see the younger generation now is very much visual. Everybody's on the phones. Everybody's on something technology wise, and that this component of the interaction with humans, or just in the back corner, not taking care of glassware and the things that we need to do to make sure service runs, is that I think the more that we put the heart into the team, knowing how important, why they're important, and not just what their role is as important, changes everything. But I think the younger generation now is expecting different things, and us as the more senior generations that exist for the industry have had to pivot significantly. And I think successfully seeing it more and more, the more vocal that the younger generation is becoming in it, because people want to have a voice, and I applaud that. So I think that we're going to have a strong. I think there's the gap that really exists right now is between all of the new technology that was really influenced because of COVID, and as much as we still need that to continue to grow and get bigger and get stronger because we're all moving faster, is that if we still do this inside looking at the fact that we're in the people business and there still has to be a human component to what we're doing, pardon me, and I think the 25 to 28-year-olds right now are going to be the next generation that starts sinking that back into all of the great technology we have, But there's got to be this component that has to exist a little bit more obviously heavy again. People going to work, like when you go and bring in your own order and you've never used a POS system before, as the general public, that's a weird thing. It just is.
Well, good news is McDonald's is training them, so that's good.
Right there we go. Right, it's like Sebastian Maniscalco does a whole piece on his comedy where he talks about where they put in self checkout because grocery stores gave up on us.
Well, did they, or did they give up on staff? Did they say, you know what, it's too expensive to have people that are like, we're losing less by letting people just steal what they don't scan than they are if we put real people there. It costs us less.
Metro grocery store here. Here's the funny thing. I My wife buys a lot of butter for her business, and we were scanning. I was scanning butter one day, and I asked the lady. I said, "Can you just do a quantity on the butter?" Lady must have been in her early 80s, still working, and she goes, "They don't let us do this anymore. You know why? It's because those young kids don't know how to do math." So every 5 butters I scanned individually, I had an invoice like this or receipt like this. She had to approve it because people are stealing butter.
Butter's expensive, dude.
Butter's expensive. Like, it's nuts. So I think everything in technology needs to exist. We need to get faster and smarter, right? But the more we're building it for that to be stronger than us, then the whole point of what we're doing in service just doesn't make sense. Because everybody will complain to you if the technology doesn't work.
Because they don't know what to do.
Because they don't know what to do, right? But then they blame the technology.
There's no other option. If that doesn't work, I guess we just don't buy butter. I don't know.
Goodness, right? But I think there's a huge opportunity, and it's funny. I was talking to a younger friend of ours, a family friend, and she was talking about how there's a miss that her at 22 and her generation will call it is having, because everything that you get is now a subscription. It's on an app. Everything is in a cloud. She goes, we miss the fact that we actually don't own anything. So she goes, so I've got friends that are starting to build CDs now because they want to be able to sell their friend a CD so their friend has something that they own. We're talking about cassette tapes. I was talking about crisscross when I used to wear my clothes backwards in 92 and 94. And then she goes, but we need to have something that we need to own, right? So I think there's going to be this weird generation that comes back of, buying LPs is a big deal again, right? So it's neat, but I think people are dynamite. I think we can get stronger again in who we're hiring because we're paying more attention to the people. But just building great people is an important thing, and the positional stuff works out quite organically when people understand why they're doing what they do and not just what I do, and it changes things.
For sure. I think, the record, I think that's why Gen X is so angry all the time. We've had to buy our record collection like 3 or 4 times now in different formats. But anyway, just before we run out of time, Chris, I wanted to just quickly ask you about sort of legacy and vision. So what do you ultimately hope to achieve through your work with the McFadden Group, your coaching work, and, if, your philosophy, I guess, is adopted more further in the industry. What do you think the industry is going to look like in the future?
My entire focus with pivoting into the way I did with actionable leadership rather than just positional leadership, as I made a joke one day, and I had done Restaurant Leadership 101, was a great course that Edwin Kumar and I did, had a very great success with it, but we were working again with the management teams and so on, and my whole thing was, well, what about the next generation that's going to be growing into these roles? And exactly on your point, Robin, is that the younger management that's getting in there, let's build people younger to be able to get into those roles and successfully achieve them at 24, 25 years old, even younger if need be. But I think there's a greater opportunity today because I'm paying attention to everybody on the team, and I'm very much a believer that the sum of the parts is equal to a greater whole, in that in my team coaching especially too, which is neat, is that there's 52 people in the room. Everybody's going to walk out with their individual component on why that was important. And not just this is how you're supposed to operate as an organization, but very much how you should operate as you within the team and for the organization. And I think it's going to strengthen things. But I want, and I absolutely strongly believe that we can make people just feel lit up again, taking care of people. And not that it's a task, but something that we want to really do and provide. I love hospitality as an industry, and I was part of the food and beverage sector of it for 25 years, and still the greatest thing that I've ever been a part of. But I love making people fall in love with it again. I love making people figure out their direction on where they were supposed to go or where they should be going, based upon who they are, and discovering a little bit more of that. But I think we've got a beautiful future ahead. And again, if everybody just remembers that they like to be a guest too, it changes how we look after guests.
Good advice.
Fantastic. I think that was really well said, Chris.
Thank you, Steve.
I want to thank you for being a part of Hospitality Manifesto. I always enjoy talking to you, and I think we need to do that more often.
Beautiful.
Okay. And yeah, you know what? Continued success. I love the fact that you've been able to take a on the floor career and get into the teaching role. And I'm envious, and I want to hear more about that next time we talk.
Love it.
But well done, sir. I'm really pleased for you and the business you've built. And I think it's the only way to go. I think that if we don't teach the industry, then there won't be one.
Love that. That is epic. Man, what a great catch up. Thank you very much. Thanks, gentlemen, for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate
Thank you, Christopher.